All right, today we're going to tackle one of the biggest, highest stakes decisions in tech architecture, and that is choosing between a multi-region and a multi-cloud strategy. Believe me, it's a choice that hits everything: your security, your performance, and yet your bottom line.
Okay, I want you to imagine it. For real. Right now. Your most important service just went dark. You're losing money by the second, and customer trust is just evaporating. Do you have a plan ready to go? Or are you just kind of crossing your fingers hoping for the best? This isn't just a fire drill. It's the reality we have to build for.
So, to even start building that plan, you got to focus on two key goals. First, high availability. That's all about preventing failure in the first place, keeping the lights on no matter what. And second, disaster recovery. That's about how ridiculously fast you can get back online when something inevitably goes wrong. These two things together are the real measure of resilience. Now, a really common mistake is thinking your cloud provider just handles all of this for you. Nope, they don't. This is what we call the shared responsibility model. See, they manage the security of the cloud. We're talking the physical buildings, the core network. But you are 100% responsible for security in the cloud. That's your data, your apps, and the big one, your resilience architecture. Okay, so let's dive into our first major strategy. This is the multi-region approach. The best way to think about it is like you're building this incredible, impenetrable fortress, but it's all inside the walled garden of a single cloud provider. So, what does this actually look like in practice? Well, it means you're deploying your app in, say, your provider's US East region, and also running a copy in their EU West region. It's the same provider, same set of tools, just in totally separate geographic locations. That way, you're protected if one whole region has an outage. The name of the game here is simplicity and consistency. You get really powerful, built-in redundancy and failover tools right out of the box. And because you're living in one ecosystem, stuff like compliance and security gets way, way easier. All your tools, all your policies, they just work everywhere. But, and this is a huge but, here's the trade-off. You are tying your company's fate to a single provider. If they have some kind of massive global failure or they suddenly change their pricing or terms of service, you're pretty much stuck. You're locked in. And that very risk, that fear of being locked in, is exactly what pushes so many people towards our second strategy, the multi-cloud path. If multi-region is a walled garden, think of this as a massive open-world game where you have the freedom to go anywhere and pick the best tools from everyone. So with this approach, maybe you're running your main application on AWS, but you have your disaster recovery site ready to go on Google Cloud. Or maybe you use Azure specifically for their top-tier machine learning services. You are deliberately not putting all your eggs in one basket. So the big wins here. It's all about choice and spreading out your risk. You totally sidestep vendor lock-in. You can literally pick and choose the absolute best service for any given job from any provider on the market. And that flexibility can be a lifesaver for meeting really specific compliance or data location rules. So what's the catch? Oh, it's a big one. Just a crazy, unprecedented amount of complexity. Your team now has to be experts across multiple platforms. We're talking different APIs, different security models, different ways of billing you. You're not just managing one system anymore, you're trying to conduct an orchestra of separate systems. And let me tell you, that is not for the faint of heart. All right, so we've got our two main paths: the simple but potentially risky fortress and the flexible but incredibly complex open world. Now it's time for a reality check. Let's look at the hard data on what this all means for performance and, of course, for price. And this table really lays out that core tension, right? With multi-region, you get easy compliance and tools that all work together, but all your risk is in one place. Multi-cloud spreads out that risk, but it explodes the complexity, which can actually lead to compliance gaps and requires a ton more management effort. And notice how cost is a factor on both sides. It just shows up in different ways. This all brings us to a really crucial point, and it's captured perfectly in this quote from Stuart Scott. Resilience isn't something you buy, it's something you architect. You can't just throw a pile of money at AWS or Google and expect to be resilient. Whether you pick one cloud or many, your success depends entirely on how well you design the system. Okay, let's make this real. A recent study simulated huge regional failures to measure something called Recovery Time Objective, or RTO. That's just the target time you have to get a service back online after a disaster. And the results? They're pretty eye-opening. Check this out.
For a really well-designed active strategy, that's where you have multiple sites live and serving traffic at the same time, the recovery time was just 3.45 seconds. Seriously, that's faster than it took me to say this sentence. For your users, the outage would barely even be a blip on the radar.
Okay, now compare that to a cold standby strategy. That's where your backup site is turned off and has to be spun up from scratch when something breaks. The recovery time there? Almost 30 seconds. That's a real outage people will notice. This just proves that your recovery strategy, active versus passive, is just as important as which cloud you choose.
So yeah, that kind of incredible performance is absolutely possible, but of course it comes at a price. And one of the biggest, sneakiest hidden costs that can completely blow up your budget is something called egress charges.
It's pretty simple, actually. Getting your data into the cloud, that's almost always free. But moving data out, whether that's to another region, to a different cloud provider, or even just back to your own office, that costs money. And you can bet that in a disaster, you're going to be moving a lot of data. And believe me, we are not talking about pocket change here. The research firm Gartner estimates that for a lot of companies, these egress fees alone can make up 10 to 15% of their entire cloud bill. It's a massive bill shock just waiting to happen if you haven't planned for it. So, with all this in mind, how in the world do you make the right call for your business? Look, there's no single magic answer, but there is a right process. So let's walk through a quick framework to help you decide. First things first, figure out which of your systems are tier 0. The ones where even a minute of downtime is a catastrophe. Those are the ones worth the biggest investment. Second, you have to be brutally honest about your team's skills. Do you actually have the expertise to manage the complexity of multiple clouds? Third, what's your risk tolerance? What scares you more, being locked into one vendor or the potential chaos of managing several? And finally, map out your specific compliance needs. At the end of the day, here's the most important takeaway. The right choice is deeply, deeply personal to your organization. It's a careful balancing act between how much risk you can stomach, how strict your regulations are, and what your team can realistically handle. Don't just chase the latest trend. And so that leaves you with one last big question to chew on. Are you building an architecture that's truly ready for the failures that are inevitably coming tomorrow? Or are you just building something that happens to work for today? The choice and the responsibility is all yours.